Welcome to another deep dive today. We're going to be exploring this fascinating idea of how sorrow can actually be a foundation for strength, particularly in faith and action. And our guide for this deep dive is going to be a recent sermon by Stephen Johnson. Trust me, he brings a really unique perspective to this whole thing.
Yeah, Johnson has this way of looking at the biblical calendar that really gets you thinking. He believes that each month has its own specific themes and events,
Yeah.
For example, he focuses on the ninth month, Kislev, as a time of clashes, contrasts, and confrontations. And he connects this directly to the tribe of Benjamin.
Oh, wow. Okay. So Kislev, that's like November, December-ish, right?
Right.
For those of us not as familiar with the Hebrew calendar, what exactly is going on during this time of year?
Well, Kislev is when Hanukkah is celebrated, which, commemorates the rededication of the Second Temple in Jerusalem after it was desecrated. So right away you have this theme of reclaiming what was lost, of fighting against oppression, pushing back against the darkness.
And that ties into the tribe of Benjamin.
Exactly. You see, Benjamin's very origin story is rooted in both sorrow and strength.
Right. Yeah, he
Well-
was born to Rachel as she was dying in childbirth.
And she initially named him Benoni, which means son of my sorrow.
Wow.
Just imagine carrying that name, that weight of grief from the moment you're born. It's, it speaks volumes about the intense sorrow surrounding his birth.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking. But then Jacob, his father, renamed him Benjamin, meaning son of my right hand.
Right, and it's a powerful shift, isn't it? Because the right hand is often associated with strength, power, and authority.
Yeah.
So you have this fascinating duality in Benjamin's identity. He's both a son of sorrow and a son of strength.
Huh. That's interesting. And that duality seems to really play out in the history of the tribe of Benjamin.
Absolutely. I mean, this tribe,
Yeah.
born from a moment of profound loss, became known for its ferocity and unwavering faith.
Wow. It's almost like they channeled that initial sorrow, that sense of loss, into this incredible resilience.
Yeah.
They were warriors, leaders, defenders of their faith. I mean, we see it over and over again.
Think about Ehud, who delivered Israel from King Eglon of Moab.
Oh, yeah.
He was a left-handed warrior from the tribe of Benjamin, and he managed to assassinate the king despite Eglon's size and his security detail.
Talk about courage under pressure,
Yeah.
right? And then there's King Saul, the very first king of Israel,
Yeah.
also from the tribe of Benjamin.
Right. Saul, he's got a complicated story,
He does.
He started strong, full of potential, but ultimately, succumbed to his own insecurities and disobeyed God.
Yeah. It's a reminder that, strength isn't always about outward victories, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also about that inner battle. To stay true to your faith. Even when you make mistakes,
Yeah.
you stumble.
Exactly. And even in Saul's failures, we see glimpses of the tribe of Benjamin's inherent strength. I mean, his son, Jonathan, he was known for his loyalty, his courage, even defying his own father to stand up for what he believed was right.
Right. And let's not forget Mordecai and Esther,
Yeah.
Who risked their lives to save the Jewish people from Haman's plot of genocide.
There it is again, that unwavering faith, that willingness to take action in the face of, immense danger.
It's like they inherited this legacy of strength
Yeah.
from their ancestor Benjamin. They understood that sorrow didn't have to cripple them. It could actually fuel their determination to fight for what was right.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And this brings us to another fascinating figure from the tribe of Benjamin,
Oh, yeah.
the Apostle Paul.
You got it.
Wow. I never realized Paul was from the tribe of Benjamin. What a connection.
It is an amazing connection when you think about it. I mean, think about Paul's journey. He endured persecution, imprisonment, shipwrecks, all while spreading the message of the gospel.
He definitely embodies that son of strength aspect of Benjamin's legacy,
For sure.
But he also wrote about his own struggles, his own thorn in the flesh, which suggests he knew sorrow deeply too.
Right. And that's what's so powerful about, the tribe of Benjamin. They didn't shy away from sorrow. They acknowledged it, even embraced it. And somehow it became the very foundation of their strength.
Yeah.
I mean, they took that sorrow, that pain, and turned it into something, something powerful, something redemptive.
Johnson argues that this connection between sorrow and strength isn't just limited to the tribe of Benjamin. It's a universal truth. It's a pattern woven into the fabric of human experience.
He's absolutely right. We see it throughout history in the lives of countless individuals who have overcome adversity to achieve great things. It's as if sorrow has this unique ability to forge resilience,
Hmm.
to refine our character, to deepen our faith.
Yeah. It's almost like sorrow creates a sort of fertile ground for something new and powerful to grow.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's like that saying, the most beautiful flowers often bloom in the roughest of landscapes.
Right.
So if sorrow can be this catalyst for strength, are there examples of this process playing out in other biblical stories? That we can look to? Absolutely. And one of the most compelling examples that Johnson uses is the story of Nehemiah. Have you ever thought about Nehemiah's story through this lens of sorrow and strength?
Actually, I haven't. Tell me more.
Well, Nehemiah was a cupbearer to the Persian king, a position of privilege and comfort. But when he received news that Jerusalem, his ancestral city, was in ruins, he was overcome with grief. And this wasn't just a passing sadness for Nehemiah. He wept, he fasted, he mourned for days.
Wow.
It was a profound sorrow, shook him to his core.
Yeah, it's interesting that you describe it that way. We often think of strength as this like stoic, emotionless thing.
Right.
But here's Nehemiah, a leader, openly expressing his grief.
Exactly. And this is where Johnson's insight about conception comes in.
Right.
He argues that God used Nehemiah's sorrow to impregnate him with a purpose.
Wow. That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
It's not about suppressing or ignoring the sorrow.
No, not at all. It's
Yeah.
about acknowledging it, letting it move through you, and then like Nehemiah allowing it to birth something new.
Okay, so in Nehemiah's case, that something new was the rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls.
Precisely. That deep sorrow he felt became the catalyst for action.
Right.
He went from weeping over the city's destruction to leading the effort to restore it.
I'm starting to see how this connects to the idea of sorrow as a foundation for strength, especially in faith.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about pretending everything is okay. It's about letting that pain, that vulnerability, drive you to do something meaningful.
And that's what's so inspiring about Nehemiah's story. He didn't let his sorrow paralyze him. He channeled it into a mission, a purpose that ultimately brought hope and security back to his people.
Yeah, Stephen Johnson talks about sorrow creating rarefied soil, didn't he?
He did.
Is that what he's getting at here?
Absolutely. It's like sorrow tills the ground, making it ready for something new to take root. It might seem counterintuitive, but sometimes it's in those broken, vulnerable places that we find our greatest strength and purpose.
Okay, this is all starting to click for me now. But I have to admit, sometimes when I'm going through a tough time, it's hard to see that rarefied soil.
Sure.
It just feels like...
Well, dirt. I understand it's difficult to see the potential for growth when you're in the midst of pain.
Yeah.
But if we look back on our own lives, I bet we can all point to times when something good, something unexpected emerged from a period of sorrow.
Right. I'm thinking about a time when I lost my job.
Mm-hmm.
And it was devastating at the time, but it forced me to reevaluate my priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually it led me to a career path that I'm much more passionate about.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of how sorrow can be a catalyst for positive change. It might not feel like it in the moment,
Right.
but often those painful experiences push us in directions we never would have considered otherwise.
So how can we as listeners start to recognize those seeds of sorrow in our own lives?
That's a great question.
What are some practical steps we can take?
Well, first, it's important to acknowledge the sorrow, to name it, to not try to bury it or pretend it's not there.
Yeah, that's easier said than done sometimes,
It is.
especially in a culture that often tells us to buck up and move on.
It's true, but allowing yourself to feel the pain, to grieve, is an essential part of the healing process.
So we acknowledge the sorrow. What's next?
Johnson encourages us to ask ourselves, what is this sorrow teaching me? What is it revealing about myself, about my values, about my purpose?
So it's not just about wallowing in the pain. It's about actively seeking the lessons, the insights that might be hidden within it.
Exactly. And that's where faith comes in. It's about trusting that even in the darkest of times, God is present and he can use our sorrow for good.
It can be hard to see the good when you're, in the thick of it, though.
Right.
Like, how do we hold on to that faith when all we feel is pain and loss?
Well, I think that's where the tribe of Benjamin's story can be so encouraging. They faced incredible adversity, war, famine, exile.
Right.
And yet their faith never wavered. They held on to that belief that God was with them even in the darkest of times.
And that's reflected in figures like Ehud, Saul, Jonathan, Esther, Mordecai, even Paul, right?
Exactly.
They all faced immense challenges, but their faith fueled their actions.
Exactly. And remember, Johnson emphasizes that Kislev the month associated with Benjamin.
Right.
It's all about clashes, contrasts, and confrontations. It's not a time of passive acceptance, but of actively engaging with those challenges, of fighting for what's right.
So it's not just about having faith. It's about that faith leading to action. It's about taking that sorrow, that fire within, and using it to make a difference in the world.
That's where true strength lies. It's not about denying the sorrow, but about transforming it into something powerful, something purpose-driven, just like Nehemiah channeled his grief into rebuilding Jerusalem's walls.
So what's the takeaway for us here? What can we learn from the tribe of Benjamin and these biblical figures who turned their sorrow into strength?
I think the key is to remember that sorrow is not the end of the story.
Yeah.
It can be a starting point, a catalyst for growth, for transformation, for deeper faith and more purposeful action.
Just like that rarefied soil Johnson talks about.
Exactly.
You might not look like much at first, but it has the potential to nourish something truly extraordinary.
We all experience sorrow in different ways.
Right.
But those experiences can shape us, refine us, and ultimately make us stronger than we ever thought possible.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the meaning of Kislev to the story of Nehemiah and the fierce faith of the tribe of Benjamin.
And through it all, I hope we've shown that sorrow, while painful, doesn't have to define us.
Yeah.
It can actually be the foundation for a stronger faith, a deeper purpose, and a more meaningful life.